Hello, ladies and gentlemen. You're welcome to the second episode of the Untold Journey podcast series with me, Nyaboth Pascal Alfred. This episode is proudly brought to you by the All Africa Conference of Churches, the liaison office to the African Union. Today, on this episode, we are joined by Dr. Agnes Abuom. Dr. Agnes Abuom is the moderator of the World Council of Churches Central Committee. And what is very interesting about her position is the fact that she's the first woman in this position and also the first African. So we will delve into her journey of her entire career and also the fact that she's a lay in this position. Dr. Agnes, we are so honored to have you today and to discuss everything about your life, of your career and where you've come from and where you're heading and the legacy that you hope to leave. How are you doing today?
I'm fine. Good morning. Thank you very much, Pascal, for having me. Yes, I'm doing quite well, and I'm glad to be part of this AACC Global Ecumenical Journey and Narrative.
Thank you. We're so honored to have you too. Thank you so much. Dr. Agnes, when someone mentioned the word peace, what does it mean? How do you interpret it at an individual level?
Peace. When I think of peace, it immediately goes back to the word in my language. And when I think of it from that perspective, it is actually to sit, to live, to be at peace with oneself, which means to be content, not to be disturbed. I think of justice. I think of inclusive relationships. I think of men and women moving together with a shared vision for a society that is just, that is sustainable, and therefore peace for me, based on that family, based on my community's language, basically means a society that respects dignity, human rights, and therefore is inclusive irrespective of age. And peace really is the wholesomeness of a person in relationship to nature, in relationship to other beings, in relationship to their livelihood. It is a holistic concept for me. And so I can't talk about peace without talking about the relationship between me and my God. Is it just? Is it whole? Does it reflect a trustworthy relationship? Peace for me also means peace with nature. I come from originally a pastoral community, and therefore animals are just as important. All kinds of species, and the earth, which is my source of life. So peace is how I live in and with nature, how I extract my livelihood from nature. Peace is also how I relate with other people. So it is a whole, it's a holistic concept. Thank you.
I like how you try to make the connection between it being very individual to the society and to the nation and above all to God. That's very, very impressive to see. Everyone has got their own stories to why they do the things they do. And today we want to go deeper into your story. Why did you choose the journey that you choose today in the ecumenical body or as doing peace? You're also an eminent person across the continent. You've been moving everywhere. trying to intervene in so many issues within the continent. Where did that spark come from? Where did you realize that this is what I am passionate about and I'm going to hold on to it and make a better society?
Thank you. My story is very long, Nyabo. I came from a society where our community was a minority and increasingly made to be a minority. And therefore, coexisting with one another was important. I went to school as part of a minority gender. Perhaps we were like 4 women. And later on, I remained alone on the journey. Why do I go back this way? It's the way we were perceived as women and our gender roles, as girls. This community of mine entertained what we call FGM. But you'll be surprised. From my grandmother all the way, we were not subjected to that because she argued as a young Christian that it was not correct. So my search for justice and peace go a very long way. In my young life, I saw communal conflict between 2 ethnic communities in which, as a primary child school going, the watchman of our school was killed in this conflict. And so from that moment in the 60s, early 60s, the whole issue of justice, the whole issue of why do people fight? Why do certain communities have pejorative language about others and even have names that cannot be uttered? Hence, my journey started. My mother, my father were community leaders. My father was an administrator. And my mother worked hard through the church to make sure that we all, as different sub-tribes and tribes, coexisted. And my anchor and my foundation was actually my Christian faith. I was going to a mission boarding school for girls. And so all along, as I moved from different places, the second stop in my journey that really informed and convinced me about justice was when I came to the University of Nairobi. And the top administration would not listen to student leadership. And so my previous leadership that was ahead of me, which I took over from, was Senator Orengo, for instance. He was actually my student leader before me. And learning from the conflictual approach between student leadership and the administration, when we came into leadership as a team with the late Ombaka, we took a peace approach. We had sitting in demonstrations instead of throwing stones, instead of running battles. And so all along this journey has been marked. Remember, as a woman, I was also struggling with gender inclusivity, marginalization, injustice, discrimination. And it's a long journey. It's a long journey.
Right.
But I want to thank those who mentored me, like the late Ambassador Kiplagat, Bethwell, when I was at the university. I actually lost my final degree at the university because of my leadership. And again, through the structures of the church, I was able to pick it up. And so wherever I've seen injustice and spoken up about it, I know it has a cost, but it has also a positive result. From a Kenya perspective, my final hammer was when I was incarcerated for joining those that struggled for democratization in 1989, Matthew. So nothing comes easy. Peace is not as soft as people want to put it. When we separate peace from the hard issues of justice, then we risk just talking, because you cannot attain sustainable peace, just peace, without including it with human rights and human dignity. And remember, human dignity is not given. It is the right to all of us by God.
Right. Wow, that's very, very powerful. And something struck me. You said the part where you even lost your degree at some point because of your leadership. And also it reminds me that maybe leadership comes with a really, really huge, not just huge responsibility, but a very high cost that sometimes you lose some things in the process. And also as let's delve a bit, let's go into your journey as the first African. In 2013, you were chosen as the moderator of the World Council of Churches, and you're the first woman in this position, and above all, the first African. You have a huge responsibility on your head. And given the fact that your childhood, from what you've just explained to us, involve you come from a minority group and also been marginalized because of your gender, what did this position mean to you?
First, it is an affirmation by the ecumenical movement that leadership is not a male exclusive, number one. It is, secondly, an affirmation that God made man and woman in his own image, and that irrespective of the gender, we look at what talents has God bestowed in individuals. There is that individual aspect, and there is that communal aspect. And so, for me, it is really an affirmation that we all belong to God's household, men, women, boys, girls. Two, that we need to move beyond and look at the talents God has bestowed upon different individuals. Thirdly, it has been a challenge. I'm a lay person, I'm a woman, I'm an African, but all those do not matter in as much as they are important before God. And so I see my election in 2013 as a major shift in the ecumenical movement, affirming the discernment of what God's will is. I see it as part of the larger inclusivity process. Remember, the ecumenical movement historically is really a Northern Hemisphere affair. We came in, we've been sitting on the margins for long, but increasingly, we've been brought to the table. The table is not yet complete, let me make it clear. Why is it not yet complete? We still do not have 50-50% of men and women in leadership. We still do not have enough young people, men and women, at the table. Despite the rules of the council indicating the percentages, we still fall short. Change is a process. Transformation is a long haul process. And so I am not pointing fingers at the churches. I'm just indicating that our historical, cultural, traditional, religious setup changes very slowly. And you know, the custodians of culture cannot change until they are ensured and assured that that change is not going to be destructive. And I think the many women who serve now, like our Deputy General Secretary, like you now in Addis, are proving the soothsayers, the negative thinkers, that we are not there to destroy. Yes, there may be one or two, but we are there to affirm life. We are there to affirm the joint pilgrimage. We are all pilgrims on this earth. We journey together towards a certain destination. There are two destinations for me. One is of justice and peace. The other one is that we accomplish God's divine calling, and that is to be the salt and the light, to show the change, to show the difference, and to invite others into this journey of prayer for peace, of work for peace, of walking together for peace.
Right. Thank you. Thank you so much for that in-depth response. If you look at the structure of Christian institutions or churches in general, it is very patriarchal in nature, and mostly the leadership is very much male dominated. And there is a little bit of progress if you look at the southern part of Africa, where women are coming up in higher positions or leadership, even in East Africa like Kenya recently. But I think more needs to be done. And what according to you should be done to ensure that more women are given equal opportunities in such structures?
Several things. Let us first of all dismiss the notion that you should be in a position just because you are a woman or a man. You should meet the requirements. So the first thing is equip, train, expose women, young people. How do we do it? Like now we are going to have a central committee in June. We do it by bringing stewards. We do it by bringing young men and women. That's exposure. That's also equipping and training. When it comes to the female gender, it's even more complex, because those that we need, like you, will be in the age of parenting. You can't afford to leave your child. So one of the challenges for our institutions is to continue to provide facilities, services for mothers. Because what we have noticed, they start as stewards, as young ecumenists, church activists, and when they now develop families, establish families, they drop off because we have not facilitated them. Remember, once they drop off, it's very difficult to replace them. So while exposure, education, equipping is necessary, we also need to look at the intergenerational participation of women, because we are carrying batons and we pass them on. So if I drop off before I pass it to you, then there is a gap. Secondly, we need to also bring men and women together. I will always remember when we ran processes in my own Anglican church, and the women were like, hey, you've taught us about gender, blah, blah, blah. How about our men? So men also need to be exposed. Men need to know who they are and to also know how they can work with women. So the joint journey. And that's why in the World Council of Churches, we talk about a just community of women and men, a just community of both of them, of boys and girls. We can't have peace unless both are actually equipped, journeying together, sharing the wounds and the pain, but also celebrating life together and seeking the transformation of our societies together.
Thank you. Great, great. Dr. Agnes, as an eminent person for peace in Africa, I'm sure you've traveled the continent wide and you continue traveling and moving and engaging in peace work. What is your most satisfaction or satisfied moment where you feel like you've been engaged in a process or intervening in a situation and you feel like the outcome was very important and you're very proud of?
There are quite a few, but I think for me, when Mekani Jesus in the mid-90s was in the process of addressing communal conflicts, we worked with them and they set up a peace office. And since that time, that church has been very instrumental in restoring communal harmony, nonviolent approach to peace building, to conflict transformation, but also to community dialogue. That for me, and as you are in that capital, I think you can bear witness to the very strong role of that church. They've not just done it as a technical thing. They've based it, one, on the word of God, secondly, on their tradition, like the guard system. For me, that is one of local, national, but very broad impact intervention. The second one was when we went to DRC. I think I've narrated this story. I was the only female. Most of my brothers and my fathers in God. It was a difficult situation with the Laurent Nkunda, but the process started, it continued, and finally, there was at least ceasefire and negotiations continued. That region remains volatile, but we have seen progress from cutting people, killing people, raping people at random, killing. I mean, we've seen some sanitization. In my own country, where I've worked with the rest of the eminent people, our climax was 2007, 2008, where we saw really the release of demons of violence and conflict, destruction. And we vowed. We had to learn from Rwanda. So taking with the rest of AACC people eminent persons. And I must thank the former General Secretary, Reverend Dr. Andre Karamaga, who really implored upon us, Kenyan churches and elders, to recognize the strategic position of Kenya and to seek to stop violence, and therefore organized for that exposure. That has left an indelible mark in most of our leaders. Even as we prepare for elections now, many people still remember the experience of Rwanda. Our visit to Liberia for the last, we were under the leadership of Her Excellence Brigadier Bam, who was the chair of Electoral Commission of South Africa. And the president of Liberia was facing a crisis. I was part of that delegation. I thank God we averted conflict by meeting different groups of people. So, Nyaboth, I could narrate much more. What I'm saying is, we have not finished the journey. We have just, we have, how would you put it? We have put fire off, but the root cause of the fire needs to be addressed. The root cause of conflicts. Yeah. Okay. So we have a conflict. Yeah, thank you.
Your experience and your exposure is way beyond imagination. You've done your part. And it's a lot. I can see there is a lot of work that you've been doing and also continue to engage in. And in all of these processes and the different engagements, what were some of the most painful memories and you feel like should never happen again, and the challenges you face along as an eminent person working for peace on the continent and in the region too?
I think it's when I went with the rest of the team to South Sudan. We have followed the search for peace, for justice. We have followed Anyanya 1 and know the cost. We have followed the intervention of AACC in restoring peace in Sudan in 1972. When this second Anyanya business started, remember, it was Khartoum, Juba, north-south. I went in there during the conflict. Two things really made me sad. That one of the bishops, I arrived in this diocese with one of my colleagues, and the Antonov had just decimated the diocese, the city. And the bishop didn't know where to start, what to do. Slowly, things moved. But what makes me sad is that whilst the Arabs did not kill people in the mosques and in the churches, our own people from South Sudan have had no remorse in killing servants of God in the sanctuaries. And when I remember the lay leaders who were killed, and many others have been killed, Catholic, professional, nuns, what can you really say? It pains. The very people who pray for peace, who work for peace, who support the victims of violence are killed by perpetrators of violence. So this second part of conflict in South Sudan has exposed me to the most painful experiences and sights. To see women, all the women raped, to see young children, our own. The Farangis have gone, but we can't say it is the Farangis anymore. So that for me is one of the most painful experience.
Yeah, indeed, it's very painful, and for South Sudanese, it's one of the most painful experiences that generations after generations, conflicts continue to emerge in different forms. And also your engagement in all these processes, it's been one of the most formidable in the process, and thank you for being part of that. If you were given a chance in your career to start all over again, will you choose the same path? And what would you do different to ensure that the work that you continue to do leaves a huge impact on the community?
Yeah, both out still. One, base my journey on faith, my Christian faith. It is, I tried as a student, communism, socialism. They talk about a new man. I saw nothing. And as an African, I think I can find my foundation, my root in the Bible. There are certain aspects of the Bible that need to be looked at carefully. But when I look now that we are in the Holy Week, and I look at Christ himself, for me, that is the model of service, self-sacrifice, love, reconciliation. So I would choose still to work for justice and peace, but from a different perspective. The different perspective is to focus on homesteads, families, children, so that people grow up with a different culture, from a culture of, let's say, believing that to be a man, you must show your muscles against a woman and beat her, violate her. That narrative would have to change from cattle rustling, violent destruction of environment. Environment came to be a focus later. It would be part of my very primary work, because Mother Earth is so critical to all of us. And our fight is basically the way we organize, mobilize, develop and use and share resources. So the very root causes that were not at the forefront, we dealt mainly with calming situations, moving immediately into reconciliation, but we must dig. So develop a new culture, begin with children, families, communities, nations. Not that it is done in steps, but it is interrelated, number one. Number two, I would put women in the forefront. Look at peace agreements. Look at negotiations. Look, where are the women? I believe God has endowed the female gender with certain abilities that men do not have. And therefore, making sure that leadership is primarily with the women, but also men. That for me has spoken a lot. I remember, and I tell you why I say this. Whenever we had conflicts in my village, and we had this meeting place full of stones, so people would sit. You had an inner circle, men, elders, wonderful. Outer circle, women. You could only get into the inner circle when you are an old elderly lady. Now, what happened? These women were not just passive. They listened, they processed, and mark you, decisions were never taken at the first meeting. Never, never, unless it was just an announcement. Because our people believed you need to process. You include others in a different way. Not that I agree with that way of gender inclusivity, but it gave them a chance to offer a second opinion to the men. So when it came to the following day, the narrative had taken a different shape and decisions were taken that favored everybody. That would be my approach.
Yeah. Ooh, that's very, very practical in nature. And I really hope and wish that that can be applied in our daily lives, in everything that we're doing, especially when the concern of resolving conflicts, this can also work out very.
But the second thing I would do at the higher level,
Yes.
as an eminent person, one of the critical things we were supposed to work on is early warning systems. It is very weak and yet very vital in determining the root causes. So we have not, I wish we could strengthen the early warning system, eminent persons who go locally but also externally. It was actually meant to be the local leadership, the local people across the generations. That would help us as eminent persons when we visit. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Agnes. That's very, very helpful. And just your final comment and remarks on what sustainable peace we should, what strategy that people should use, especially the higher institutions that implement, for instance, different approaches in resolving conflicts, mediation processes, negotiation, or in general in mediation processes. What kind of sustainable solutions should they always strive to?
I think that history has now exposed us to a very wide range of strategies, methods. To begin with, I think we need to appreciate that every community, including the First Nations, the so-called pastoralists that are looked down upon, that every community has a history of ensuring and working for sustainable peace. We have come a long way now by appreciating, but we've not drawn all of it. If you go to South Sudan, for instance, or even Kenya here, we have not lifted up, refined, developed the traditional methods that can inform our other methods. We tend to borrow too much from the West. Most peace practitioners in the churches have gone to Mennonite, Eastern Mennonite University. Fine. Do we have our own mechanism of comparing that or enhancing that with what we have? We have a lot. When I think of the Karamoja Triangle, there is so much. A few people have written about it. think of the cost, think of everywhere. So we have appreciated, but I think we do need for eminent higher institutions to be more serious in applying that.
Mhm.
First, we need to harvest them before they disappear.
Mhm.
For example, reconciliation mechanisms that really bind people. Would be very helpful.
Mhm.
Secondly, I think we do need to further develop the different facets of the higher level. For example, women of faith mediators.
Mhm.
How are we accompanying them? How are they feeding back their own experiences to us? For example, like the eminent persons. Do we ever sit with them? Do we mentor them? The young people who now represent another culture, not the original culture, but it is a melange, it's a mixed culture.
Mhm.
And we must appreciate that is changed. We are not in the original bubble. So how do we bring that in? Finally, the whole area of technology, we like it or we don't, technology is an important element of peace building, mediation. Can we build skills? We saw during COVID how young people helped the elders in the churches to quickly tap into technology and not lose their ministry, and therefore offered services. So technology and peace.
Right. Thank you. And here is technology giving us all this ability
Exactly.
to have the conversation.
Exactly.
Thank you very much, Dr.
Yeah,
Agnes
my
Abuom.
last comment will be,
Yes, please.
if you look at the conflict, and I think I mentioned to you yesterday,
Mm-hmm.
the models of decision making that we borrowed, parliamentary system, just heightens, increases conflict. What we have learned during my tenure is to appreciate other decision-making mechanisms like consensus building, consensus decision-making, very much rooted in our cultures, but needs to be developed because it provides another parameter, it provides another culture of listening, of appreciating the other voice, of even documenting that voice in its totality, because you never know tomorrow when that voice may actually be the voice of reason. So for us as eminent persons in AACC, can we say, okay, what can we borrow from World Council in terms of experience now of consensus decision making? How do we relate it with our own communities because they did consensus, and then let's develop it, so that we have a homegrown method.
Right.
I will deal with that.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We would go on and on. I enjoy talking to you because you have this wisdom that comes from the heart and from your experience, from your exposure, that is very interesting to always listen to. And thank you so much for taking us through your journey, through your entire career, where it has informed you to do the work that you're doing today. We truly appreciate it, and we continue to um, to appreciate you for all the work that you're doing. We see you, we appreciate you, and we want to take forward the lessons and the experiences and the strategies that you're using in the different piecework, so we can carry on the baton from where you're living. Yes. Dear viewers, thank you so much for staying connected. But before you go off, make sure you click on the AACC YouTube channel and subscribe to it to be updated of all the notifications that will be coming in the near future. Thank you for being part of this discussion. Thank you very much once again, Dr. Agnes. Have a blessed day and take care of yourself.
Thank you, Nyabot. Have a blessed Easter.
Thank you.